The greatest band in the universe, Béla Fleck and the Flecktones.
We have a very special guest this week on the Corner of Gray Street podcast. We are beyond excited and thrilled and blessed to be able to speak with this gentleman, 15-time Grammy Award winner. He has been nominated in more categories than any other artist in Grammy's history. He is an incredibly creative and versatile musician who has had...
Not true?
Not true.
Well, it is very true. He has, over the past 40 years, masterfully explored many musical genres, including bluegrass, rock, classical, pop, and even one of my favorite Christmas albums. We would like to welcome Mr. Béla Fleck. Mr. Fleck, thank you for joining Nolan and I this afternoon.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was just correcting you because for some reason that's what people say about the Grammys for me, but it's actually confused. I think I may be the most nominated instrumentalist. But as far as I know, both Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan have more actual Grammy categories.
Well, you know, we won't get on to you
company.
about that one. It's good. Yeah, it's pretty good company.
I don't like to get extra stuff I don't deserve. I get more than I deserve usually, but that's true. Okay, yeah, good to see you guys. How's it going?
Yeah, you too. It's good. Just doing the quarantine thing. I see you've been growing a sweet quarantine beard there.
Yeah, we all are, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the thing to do, I think. So family is doing well. How is, you and your wife have been doing some of those Banjo House lockdown live streams. Are y'all doing any more of those? What's kind of the plan there?
Well, we put that on hold partly because childcare became really difficult for us, and it was kind of, the honest truth is the most fun shows to watch from Banjo House Lockdown are the ones where the kids are going crazy and we're trying to do the show and we've got no childcare. They were really fun, but they were hard. They were the most unpleasant while they were happening and the most fun while we're watching them afterwards. But we put it on hold partly because Abby is doing Chinese studies at Middlebury College online this summer. And I'm finishing up projects, so I had a lot of stuff to do too. And not that. We may do it again at some point, but we did 9 of them, and they're all up there for people to watch, and we're really proud of them. We had a really good time. They're funny, and we learned more music in that 9 weeks than we've done in our whole time playing together.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Loved watching those, and if you haven't seen them, check them out on Bela's YouTube channel.
Yeah, Abby's kind of a superstar on those. She's just so good with the camera. She does a lot of great camera work while she's singing and playing, and she's very funny. And yeah, it's a look into our world.
That's sweet. Well, we have actually been fans of yours and the Flecktones for a long time. Bruce and I saw you guys together in Greensboro in January 2006, part of the Hidden Land tour at the Carolina Theater.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a blast at that, and I remember like vividly when you brought out it's like a purple electric banjo.
Sure, that's right.
And the wah pedal, and I was just amazed. It was awesome. And then Jeff Coffin busted out 2 saxophones at the same time, and we were hooked.
Oh, thank you. It's funny, thinking back about it, the electric banjo with the wah-wah is actually, it's a lot of fun to play, but it's probably the least unique sounding. It doesn't sound like a banjo. It could be an electric guitar, except for the techniques that I use. But so I always felt a little bit like I was cheating, but playing it because that wasn't living up to the standards that I try to set myself to be unique. But I guess the fact that it's an electric banjo and not a guitar, and that the notes, the tuning that I'm in is different, makes it still sort of work for me. But I've been playing a lot of acoustic banjo for the last, I don't know, number of years, except when the Flecktones get back together and tour, and then I get that purple banjo back out. It's got band-aids on it and finish cracked off of it. It's been through the wars, but it is a great act. It's really fun to play.
That's awesome. Well, jumping into more recent stuff, what are you working on right now? I know their most recent album, Echo in the Valley, was another duo effort with your wife, but what other than Banjo House Lockdown, what's been going on music-wise?
I started a bluegrass project. I wanted to do a record kind of along the lines of a couple of albums I've done over the years. One was called Drive, and one was called Bluegrass Sessions. And those were my bluegrass banjo. And when I say bluegrass, they're fairly progressive, but they're still a bluegrass band.
Mm-hmm.
The best bluegrass band I could find, which at the time was Tony Rice, Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, and Mark O'Connor, and Stuart Duncan, Mark Schatz on the bass. So I wanted to do that kind of record again, and it had been about 20 years since the last one. And so I started recording with different people, and I had a lot of different ideas of what I'd like to do and who I'd like to play with. But first I was going to try and do it with all of those same guys, but Tony Rice isn't playing anymore, and Mark O'Connor wasn't really into it. So I started thinking about maybe playing with some younger guys, some younger people. And then I got together with some of these great players like Paul Cowart, who plays bass with the Punch Brothers, and Michael Cleveland, the great fiddle player who happens to be blind, is just a phenomenon, and a whole other generation of players. And I started recording with them, and then I thought, well, why aren't I recording with my old friends too? And I've always felt like when you make a record, it's nice if it's the same personnel all the way through. I was talking to Abby about it, and she said, well, why couldn't you do a record where you had different people on different tracks? And I was like, I don't know, it's against my DNA. And then I embraced the idea. And now it's a double album, and it's got David Grisman, it's got Chris Thiele, it's got Sam Bush, it's got Dominic Leslie, it's got Sierra Hull, all on mandolin. On guitar, it's Brian Sutton and Cody Kilby and Billy Strings. And on guitar, I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. On fiddle, it's Michael Cleveland, Stuart Duncan, Billy Contreras, Andy Leftwich. On dobro, it's Jerry Douglas, because he's still my favorite dobro player, and he wanted to do it. On bass, Edgar Meyer. So I'm sure I'm leaving some people out, but it's turned into this vast, sprawling work, and I've been editing and mixing it myself because, hey, I'm home. So we were going to do a big tour, and the tour got canceled, of course, because of COVID, and everything's put. So I've been working on that, and having 2 hours of complicated banjo music to work on in the basement is not the worst way to spend your time. So I've been doing a lot of work on that, and trying to mix them. I'm not really an engineer, but I have ended up mixing a lot of records just because I was the only one who was willing to put in the amount of time that it took, to get it the way I wanted it. So it's kind of like a vanity project or something. I could hire somebody great, and he could spend a couple of weeks on it, or I could spend a year on it, in my spare time. And just the sheer amount of time hopefully would end up with a higher even level, quality, or at least some benefits. And also the fact that it's completely artist generated. There's no other hands in between the artist and the actual final product. So I happen to be tweaky enough to love to sit around and hair split and play with an EQ and decide, oh, it's 1/10 of a dB of this. Maybe it should be over one fraction. I can do that, for months, and I'm kind of getting to the end of it now. And then aside from that, my hero and friend Chick Corea got in touch with me, and he asked me if he'd like to collaborate on some stuff. So we've been sending stuff back and forth, and we've been working on some really neat music. And you wouldn't think you could do a duet like that without being in the room together, but we've worked on it. He'll send something to me, maybe with a click track that he's played to, or maybe not, and then I'll go play to it. And then after I played my solo, he might redo his part or some part of it to get the feeling of what it would be like if we were sitting together playing. And because we've played together so much, I don't know. I think it's really working out good, and it's forcing us into some different creative places than we would be if we were sitting in the room doing it together. So, I'm not saying it's a substitute, but I'm saying that there are some things that can be arrived at that are different, and as a product of this unique situation we all find ourselves in. But that's exciting, working on that with him. And then I also have an album in the can with Edgar Meyer and Zakir Hussain and Rakesh Chaurasia. And Zakir is the world's greatest, or at least the foremost tabla player in the world. And Edgar, of course, is incredible bowed bass player and plucked bass player with classical and bluegrass and jazz influences. So that project is still here for me to complete. You know what I mean? So it's great. I've got phenomenal stuff in the can that is worth spending my time on, and then I'm getting to actually play with the stuff with Chick, and then the Banjo House Lockdown stuff. But most of what I'm doing is washing dishes.
Yeah,
watching a 2-year-old and So I might be up at 6 in the morning watching the kids till while Abby's doing her homework for her Chinese studies, and then around 9:30 or 10, I get to work on music till about 5, and then I'm back with the kids until 9. So it's a long day. I'm kind of wiped. It's kind of exhausting.
It is. I'm there with you. It's I'm looking after our 9-month-old just about every day, and it's challenging. It's fun, but it's different than we're used to, I think.
Well, it's funny how you can for me, I can sit and tweak for around the clock. I mean, if I wasn't with family, I could be working on this stuff from 10 in the morning until 2 in the morning, get up and do it again for month after month. But spending 2 hours with a kid and having to like stop and slow down, like I'd be watching the clock. How much more time do I have before she comes out of her study? So she'll take over, because
Yeah.
it's such a different sense of time,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not in control of anything, and you just have to slow down to what's happening. And I'm getting better at it, but I think they're also aging into a place where we can connect more. So Abby says I'm getting better, but I think they're just getting older, and we can talk. It's fun.
Well, I haven't gotten there
Yeah.
quite yet. Hopefully, I'll be that lucky man one of these days. Hopefully, in the near future. That is an incredible amount of stuff that you were working on there, Bela. And so, obviously, you're with a ton of different musicians there, which kind of leads me to, how did you get started in music? And in those early years, who were your influences that brought you, to where you are today?
I heard the banjo on the Beverly Hillbillies sitcom, which was Earl Scruggs playing the banjo, and Earl Scruggs was the badassest banjo player ever came along, and he transformed the banjo into a virtuoso instrument, coming out of the folk and old time bluegrass world, and he made it a whole new kind of music on it. Now, before Earl Scruggs, ironically, there was an incredible virtuosity of banjo playing, but it was a different kind. It was there were these guys called the Banjo Kings that were super popular in the late 1800s, doing fingerstyle banjo, but it wasn't bluegrass. It was more like almost like ragtime stuff, and music of the day. But all of that was dying out at the time that Earl Scruggs came along, and it was mostly being played in folk hands. The banjo played a big role in jazz. It was in the original jazz bands, in Louis Armstrong's band and Jelly Roll Morton's bands, and it predated the guitar in jazz, and we forget about that. But that was the 4-string banjo. That was a strum kind of thing. That wasn't this plucking, rippling thing that Earl Scruggs came up with. And I feel like he brought the banjo back from extinction, basically, because black people didn't want to play the banjo at that point. They even though it started with them, it was their instrument that came over with slavery. Too many white folks had put on blackface and sung about how great it was on the plantation. It was just disgusting to them. And so when they had a chance to move on to the guitar, the banjo quickly was kicked out of jazz for all those connotations. The looking back at slavery and the minstrel white folks that did minstrel music on the banjo and played in blackface and so forth. It was just offensive. The guitar didn't have any of that, those connotations. So. But at any rate, I heard Earl Scruggs, and he knocked me out. But I didn't actually get a banjo till I was 15. And when I did, pretty soon I heard a guy named Tony Trischka, who was on the cutting edge of modern banjo, and still a phenomenal player. And I got to take lessons from him. Ironically, he lived in the Bronx. I grew up in Manhattan, and I got to take lessons with like the top guy of avant-garde banjo, who Tony was. And still is. Yeah, so then I got into all the bluegrass banjo players, but at the same time, as I was listening to Tony Trischka and taking lessons from him, I got to see Chick Corea perform with the Return to Forever at the Beacon Theater, and this would have been 1975, with a killer band, an unbelievable band, and it kind of changed my whole image of what music could be. And he had Stanley Clarke in the band, and Lenny White on drums, and Al Di Meola. It was a 4-piece band, and in a way, it's the template for the Flecktones. It was mixed, 2 black guys, 2 white guys, combining a lot of musical ideas from classical to rock, to jazz, and when I went off into bluegrass, spent the next 10 years making my way in bluegrass, I always had this idea that there was some way to do banjo like that, and I was working on it. Till I was lucky enough to meet Victor and Future Man and Howard in the '80s when I was playing in a band called Newgrass Revival, and which was kind of the I guess the Punch Brothers of its time. For folks that don't know Newgrass, it was Sam Bush and John Cowan and Pat Flynn, and we were sort of the rock bluegrass band, the sort of high energy pyrotechnical bluegrass band at the time. And then I started the Flecktones in 1990, full time. But we really started in '88. We did our first things. But I guess I'm moving on. That's kind of a lot of it, I guess.
Yeah. So that's perfect transition. Next, we were going to ask, like, how did the Flecktones begin? And I mean, it seemed kind of similar, like with the Dave Matthews Band, a very unique mix of instruments and music. Can you walk us kind of through how that happened?
Well, I was always a closet jazz player and not very good at it, but I loved it, and it was hard to do on the banjo with the tuning and the picks and everything. But I was always working on it, and in fact, I had put together a band called Banjo Jazz with a bunch of Nashville great players that did a lot of sessions and stuff like that. And it just wasn't work. It didn't really work for me. I mean, it was good, but it wasn't good enough, like, to go do and leave Newgrass. Newgrass was the top band of its time of this genre, whatever you would call it, but front edge modern bluegrass, I guess, of that time. And so anyway, I gave up on this idea of having my own band, and then Victor sort of showed up in my life. He called me up one day and played the bass over the phone for me and was doing all this crazy tapping and triple thumb plucking and all this stuff. And I thought it was, really cool, but I didn't know what it had to do with me, because at this point I'd kind of given up on the idea of doing something. And he'd seen a video of me playing with Newgrass, and he said he just liked to get together with people that played different instruments and trade techniques. So we came over to the house and we had a jam session like that. Was very eye-opening for I'd say for both of us, but for me, because all of a sudden a lot of the things that I was trying to do made sense when I was playing them with him. And it's kind of set me free. And another guy I had met while traveling with Newgrass was a guy named Howard Levy, who's the piano player, harmonica player, and he's a freak of nature, the way I'd say Victor is. Nobody like him. He does things with the harmonica that people say can't be done, like playing multiple voices with one mouth, like playing piano and harmonica simultaneously, playing in keys that are not even on the harmonica, because through manipulating the tones. He's they're both inventors, And when I had the opportunity to do a television show called The Lonesome Pine Special, which you actually can find online, I put together a band with these guys and Future Man, who Victor told me about. I was looking for a drummer that was unique, because I had these two guys and they were certainly unique. And I had this chance to do this television show. They said, if you want to put together a jazz band and try your jazz idea, you could maybe try and see if maybe one of the Marsalis brothers would do it, or, we've got a budget here, go get some cool guys. And I said, I think I'd rather do something with these freaks, because they're more like, it's not me trying to be a jazz guy, like we're all just weird together. And then I needed a drummer, and Victor started telling me about his brother. And it started out with me hanging out in Nashville with Victor and going to see different guys play that I liked. And I said, what do you think of him? He said, you ought to check out my brother. And then we go another night, we go hear another guy in another club and say, hey, he's pretty good, huh? Right? He'd say, you really ought to check out my brother. And so at a certain point I was like, well, all right, let's check out your brother. And so we had this phone call, and I didn't hear him play anything because he really couldn't figure out why I was calling him, because he hadn't really even completely built the thing yet. But it sounded kind of crazy. And I had a friend who had told me he was a great drummer, but I hadn't met him, hadn't heard him. We had this long conversation on the phone about odd time meters and how to count things. And I was like, man, this guy is just a brilliant brain. And I went and I hadn't hired him for this television show, for my 1-hour PBS station television special, without ever having met him or heard him play, just on faith. And so he came to Nashville with his Drumitar, his first model. And we sat and played with me and Victor, and he sat in my back room of my house. And it was incredible, because just like Victor, he enabled me to do all these things that always seemed a little bit odd. All of a sudden they sounded right. They sounded natural, and it was a context that I needed. and Victor and Future Man provided the context for my banjo to do what I had wanted to do with it for this whole time. Then we did this one show with Howard, and we all went, wow, let's do it again. And so that was late '88, and we did 4 gigs around the end of the year, little tiny clubs. But we learned a whole night of material, so we could play these little tiny clubs, and mostly my stuff that nobody had ever heard. It was really weird, complicated music, and these guys would soak it up. The bluegrass guys would, when I'd make a record like Drive or something with Sam Bush and Tony Rice, they would say, too many brains, Bela. This stuff's too complicated. Simplify. It doesn't need to be this complicated. Like they said to Mozart, too many notes, too many notes. I was like, okay, but now these guys were like, more notes, please. This is for us. We can handle this stuff. Anything you need. What else you got? So now I was, actively writing the most, complex and challenging stuff I could write, because I had guys that could do it. So we went ahead and made a record together on my own money, which I'd been saving up from years in Newgrass. I was in the band for 9 years, and we finished the record, recording the record after like 7 days in a studio, and I had to leave at we finished at like 5 a.m, and I had to catch a flight to Death Valley to shoot a Newgrass revival video for a song called "Calling Baton Rouge," which later became a #1 hit for Garth Brooks, but not for us. But at any rate, if anybody wants to look at this video, Newgrass Revival, Calling Baton Rouge, you'll see me wearing these Ray-Ban sunglasses because my eyes were so bloodshot because I'd been up for 7 days straight making this Flecktones record, got on a plane, met the guys out there, and was shooting a music video in Death Valley in, whatever it was, 100-degree heat. And my eyes were just so red. But I was on the plane, and instead of going to sleep on the plane, what did I do? I put on the rough tapes from the recording session. And as I listened, as I flew out to do this video, I realized I'm gonna have to leave the band. This music is too special. I'm gonna have to leave Newgrass Revival. And it was a very poignant, sad, and exciting moment at the same time, because that band was a marvelous band and put a lot of time and love into that music. But so anyway, I gave them like to the end of the year, which was I think maybe 8 or 9 months, and then the Flecktones started at our last gig was opening for the Grateful Dead at Oakland Coliseum, Newgrass Revival's final show, and then the next day I was a Flecktone.
Wow. 30 years later, still making music with Victor and Future Man. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is awesome.
And of course, all the years kept Coffin in the middle.
Yes,
was actually with the band longer than Howard, but he came in the center, and he was an incredible part of the band as well.
Yeah, y'all have had several people step in, and I think we'll talk about one in a minute with Paul McCandless. But as this is a DMB, Dave Matthews Band podcast, I did look it up. You've actually performed with Dave 71 different times, 286 song performances. Wow. So when did you first meet Dave or anyone from the band? How did that relationship start?
Well, Newgrass used to play at a place called Trax in Charlottesville occasionally, and I have it under good authority that Dave was a bartender at Trax when we were doing that, and maybe Boyd was around too. I'm not sure. And they hadn't quite. I think maybe they're just a couple of years behind us starting. When did they actually start? Do you know?
91.
Yeah. So they were just. We were really going, and by '88 our history had started, and by in '89 we were making a record and touring a little bit. So we were a little ahead of them, and we had built a pretty good audience. But as we would travel around the country, sometimes we'd be driving to our pretty nice theater we were going to play, and we'd pass some dump, and there'd be a sign of all the bands that were playing there, and Dave Matthews Band would be there, and we'd say, "Oh, Dave Matthews Band," and Victor and Roy would say, "Oh yeah, we know them. Carter Beaufort is in that band. He's one of our pals from when we were kids in the Virginia." So they used to have this scene. The Wootons had this scene where there's 5 of them. They're all marvelous musicians, and they had a garage set up to jam in, and every great musician in the area would show up there, regularly. And so Carter became a good friend of theirs back then. So, and it would happen again and again, oh, here we're playing a nice theater, or they're playing the the bucket of blood down the street, whatever, these little dumps, But then at a certain point, they started to seem to be doing a little bit better. And one day I got a request from my manager. Oh, this Dave Matthews Band wants to see if you'll open some shows for them. And I was like, I guess they're doing pretty good, huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're playing, arenas. Oh my gosh, how did that happen? But I was still like, I could only think of them as this little band that was, playing the little buckets of blood. So, and we had other things going on. We were busy. So I was like, sorry, tell them I'm sorry, but I just don't think we can pull it off this year. But they were persistent and they kept asking. So finally, we got to do, I think it was a New Year's set of dates, maybe in Virginia, I believe. Maybe a set of dates, and it was incredible. I mean, it was like, wow. And I think in the beginning, maybe they just invited me out to come and play a few tunes with them. But as time went on and we did more and more things with them, pretty soon the whole band would be on stage with them, and we'd just be, having a blast together. They were just very welcoming and respectful to us, and we loved them. I went from like, hearing their music and thinking, oh, that's nice, pretty cool, weird voice, and cool beat, nice instruments, cool jazzy thing. That's okay. That's pretty good. To like falling deeply in love with their music as I got to know them and I got to hear it again and again. Their music gets better and better to you the more you listen to it, and then when they started, asking me to come out and play with them and sit in, gosh, it was a rock and roll fantasy. I remembered playing for the Grateful Dead the first time, and that was the first time I ever had played in an arena at the Oakland Coliseum, and thinking, wow, I wonder if I'll ever be playing these places again, I have a feeling I will. I was still pretty young. I said, I have a feeling some weird way I'm going to end up playing in arenas again, and it happened, it was with Dave, and so they allowed me to live out a rock and roll fantasy. Banjo rock and roll fantasy. But the neat thing about them is if they get you to play on something, usually when I sit in with somebody, they don't want you to go that long. I mean, they want you to play, but there's okay, back to the song, But whenever I would come out and play with them, I would try to be tasteful. I'd play a minute or something, and I'd be like, oh, okay, and I'd nod out, and they go, no, keep going, man, keep going. Just loved that because they were so encouraging, and they just loved to go with the moment, and they weren't trying to package it into a small package. There were none of that. It was a whole different thing. And even, things were bizarre to me that were going on with them. Like they'd leave the stage at the end of the show, and maybe 10 minutes would go on before they'd go back for their encore. It was like I couldn't relate to like what's going on here. We were always such in a hurry to get back on stage, even with a great show, and because we think the audience was going to stop clapping, and we wouldn't get to do the encore. But they were like in a whole different place. They were used to their celebrity. The fans knew they were going to come back. There was just a lot of things we learned from watching them operate, and really they were very they made the music and the band they gave the band and the music a lot of latitude to be itself, and I think that's what the people loved about it so much. So some years later, they asked me to play on Crowded Streets album, and I got to go work with them in the studio, and that was just a thrill to be on a record like that, because I'd done a lot of sessions in Nashville, got to play on the Dolly Parton records and the Garth Brooks, platinum records, and Randy Travis and things like that, and Bruce Hornsby records. That was pretty neat. But this was it felt like a whole other thing, a whole other level of the kind of stuff I like, really, really like, So I was really proud to be on that. And then when they finally got their first chance to play in stadiums, not arenas, but stadiums, because, 15,000 people wasn't enough. Now they need to play for 80,000 people.
Of course.
Whether they were nervous or what, but they invited a few special guests to come out and play with them. And I got to be on those first three shows, their first three stadium shows. One of them was Foxborough, and one of them was, I think, Giant Stadium, I believe, and one of them was in Philadelphia. And I got to walk on stage with these guys. For some reason, I was on the first song of the show at Foxborough, the first stadium show, and I got to walk down the ramp with those guys into that whatever it was, 70,000 people, and see what it must be like to be, in the Rolling Stones and walk on stage with the Rolling Stones. It was an unbelievable rush. I really loved it.
That is so cool. And like, are you aware of the like legendary status that you and the Flecktones have from guesting with DMB? Like the DMB community is like, anytime Bela is mentioned, it's, I mean, like, you're a legend among the fan base.
Well, I'm glad that they appreciate it. When I hear it back, it makes me very proud. When I hear the music itself, and I have to say that Dave and the band did us a remarkable solid. I mean, our record that came out around the time we started doing all those shows, Live Art, I mean, it was at the peak of our own career success, but they kicked it up to a whole other level, and we had record sales that we'd never seen before because that whole audience was embracing what we were doing. And yeah, we're an esoteric band. You know, you shouldn't expect to sell that many records or reach that many people with a band that's chosen to do music like we were choosing to do. But Dave and the guys really helped. You know, they really helped.
That's awesome. I mean, we are so grateful for that and so glad for that. You mentioned, you know, guesting on the Before These Crowded Streets record. Do you remember a lot from those sessions? I think you were on 3 full songs and one of those commercials, as Steve Lillywhite would call it. Do you remember any other jams that y'all did or anything else from those sessions? Like, what stood out to you there?
I was brought in after the fact. So I was there with Dave and Steve Lillywhite, and maybe a couple of other guys came in and out a couple of times. But it was just in a studio. I believe it was in New York City. And, you know, we worked on it. We worked on some things they just threw me at some stuff and let me just play on some stuff. Some things I said, hey, let me work on this. I've got an idea. I remember the song Spoon. We really worked on it. So we wanted to have a really special, it was a kind of a great setup, but it was hard to play because it was slow for banjo. The banjo is a lot easier to play fast. The slower, the harder it is. So that was the song, right, Spoon?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really nice opportunity. And then I remember playing Don't Drink the Water. And Steve Lillywhite really did a great job on that stuff. I was really impressed with his ability, because sometimes I'll work with a producer and you know, you'll do some tracks and then you'll hear the final and it's not as good as what, you know, the good stuff didn't make it in. Mm-hmm. But he'd say, now leave me alone for a while. I'd play 5 or 6 takes or whatever, passes, and then he'd say, now leave me alone for a while. And then we'd leave and we'd go out and hang out. And Dave was always so much fun to hang out with. He was a lot of fun energy. I know he sparks with everybody, but I still felt like we had have a very special, fun time when we're together. But at any rate, then Steve would invite you back in. What do you think? And he'd play you back his comp of what you did. When you comp, if you do 5 takes of something, you go through it and you pick the best parts of those 5 takes and make it into a new master take. And Steve did a great job with my banjo parts. He had an intuitive sense of where I'd played the best, and I might say, oh, well, that's not possible. You know, can we move that edit point a little bit, or just a little bit? But and he seemed to have a great relationship with Dave and the guys at that point. I know there was some difficult things that happened later on, but he was very, very good, and they had a real groove going, and the tracks sounded just amazing. So it was a thrill. It was a thrill.
I'm gonna jump real quick. You mentioned the band like wants to play long and doesn't cut you off when you're guesting or anything. There is it's part of DMB folklore, like a 30-minute version of Number 41 from 2002. Do you remember playing on this? Or
that when we would do 41, you know, again, I'm always coming from the point of view that if I'm the guest, I'm not going to extend things. I want to get invited back. You know, so if anything, I'm going to go on the shy side. They're always like, well, no, let's go. So we would come off stage and Dave would say, the guys would say, man, we're trying to get up to 41 minutes. See, we almost made it this time. So I think we got 30 minutes. I think we made it well into the deep 30s on one of the nights, because I know we thought we were getting close to 41 minutes. But for a band at that level with a sold out, you know, outdoor amphitheater, to be that loose and open and creative and willing to ride the waves and see where they took them was really, really amazing. It was really something to be part of. And I would say there's something about the combination of those guys and us guys all together that seemed to create a true magic, that something special was going on when we were all on stage together, and we all could feel it. and the audience could feel it, and amazing things would happen.
Absolutely.
Even at sound check, even at sound check, I mean, it seemed like we were almost be writing tunes together. We would be jamming at sound check.
Oh, I want these
We didn't
recordings.
need to do a sound check, but we wanted to. We all get up on stage at the end of their sound check and run our stuff up and get on stage and play with them, and we just would have, great things would happen.
Well, that's when you know it's good, when you don't want to stop playing. That sounds awesome.
How 41 happened because there's a tune Victor has called "Sojourn of Arjuna." It's a fiddle tune, like an Irish tune, and we were at one of those sound checks, and he started playing it. I don't know if Victor started playing it, or maybe I started playing it on top of 41, which they were showing us, and it stuck. That became the hook that made 41 kind of a two-band song that we could play that song in the middle of their tune.
And it worked perfectly. They still use it.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Jeff probably
it's
played
still
it.
awesome. Yeah, Jeff throws it in every now and then. It was just really cool seeing, it would be a Leroy solo, your solo, or Jeff's solo. Y'all would kind of do these interchanges. And like you said, you wouldn't just go for a minute. You guys would go for 3, 4, 5 minutes sometimes. And then all of a sudden it's both bands just completely going at the same time, but in unison. It was having 9, I think, of you guys on stage at once, and not sounding like noise is very, very tough to do for a rock band.
That's true, and their crew and our crew got to be very warm and good friends. And Richard Battaglia, who's our sound man, and their sound man would sit together, and for some reason I'm spazzing on his name, but he would always treat Richard like an elder and ask his advice, and let Richard make a few suggestions here and there. Because Richard's an old hand at sound. He's a great sound man, but he would pretty much let Richard handle our faders. Where some sound men for enormously popular rock bands would not be, here, mix your band. They'd be like, no, I don't want them to get too loud. I want my band to be, it wasn't like that. It was like, no, crank them up, So that was a very sweet relationship too.
Got a few just quick hitters. Do you have a favorite DMB song, or a favorite song that you'd like to guest on with them?
Oh, well, Lie in Our Graves is always really a lot of fun. I guess the first ones that would come to mind would be Lie in Our Graves or 41, because they're just such open spaces to improvise on.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, Dave would say, "What do you want to play on?" And I would say, "Throw me up there on something I've never heard." And in later years he would do that. He would throw me up there on something, and I would be like cramming to learn it before the show. He said, "We're going to get you on this song." I'd be like, "Oh my God." He's doing what I asked him to do. But I thought it would be fun to try and figure out a way to play on I mean, I got to know all the songs. There was a point where I would be, instead of being back in the dressing room doing my thing before their show, I would just sit on the side of the stage with my banjo and play along with the whole show. So by the time I came out to sit in, I would be, not only would I be warmed up, but I was also getting to know all the songs. I didn't know what they were called, what the names were, but I was, getting very familiar with how they all went. And I might say, "Hey, can we do the one with the pedal point and that where the pedal goes to be there for the whole?" And they'd be like, "What song are you talking about?" And we couldn't figure out what it was, because I would discover these little note points where I could hold one chord over the whole chorus, and it would just really sound cool. It would create a static point when all the chords would move against. And I would find all these things as I was sitting around backstage. And I also really enjoyed their time signatures, because that is a big part of what the Flecktones was into. So I liked a seamless time signature change is a really fun thing, and they do them really, really well. So if I could find some of those things to get involved with, I would always ask to do those. But I never.
That's awesome.
Now, what's that first song on Crowded Streets? Dun 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun,
Rapunzel.
Oh, Rapunzel, yeah.
Yeah, Rapunzel, man, that one drove me crazy. So that drum beat against that was just so intense, and I was always trying to find some way to make it work, get the banjo to work in there with it. I didn't get to play on it too many times, probably because there was so much going on already between the drums and everything else there that and I would ask Carter, "What are you doing?" And he'd explain it to me over and over again, and I could never actually get it.
Glass-eyed at Carter's explanations. That's pretty awesome that you were learning songs, like all the songs, and Dave would throw you on songs that you didn't know, because the first time that you guested with them, after it had been a while, and I was at Blossom Music Center in 2014 when you came back, just kind of standing right in front of you, probably 5 people from the stage, and was just like, what is, everyone around was just floored that you walked back on the stage after, however many years it was. And you guested during their acoustic set on Snow Outside. And that is still probably the best version of that song ever. And it is still one of my favorites of any of their performances and any of your guest spots. I'm not even really sure why. Maybe because I was there, attendance bias.
It is something
but it is. And that was just an incredible thing. Do you remember that night at all? How did that happen? Like, what led to you coming back to guest with the band again?
I can't remember how it came about. Maybe they must have. Jeff was always suggesting it, and I was always game to do it. I remember. I think I came out for 3 shows. Maybe it was only 2, and I was on my own tour bus, just me and Richard. And we had a few days in between things, and I really wanted to keep that relationship. If those guys wanted to do it, I wanted to do it. I think Dave, maybe Jeff had told me that Maybe Jeff had said that Dave kept saying, man, Bela should come around. So I said, well, I'll come around if they want me to. I just want to be sure they want me to. So I did, and we had just a great, I think the first night I only played on maybe 3 songs. The second night I played on like 8 songs or something.
I know. I was like, no.
They ease into things. It's not like they have their own pace.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own pace. They're very unique that way. But the longer you're together, and like the first night I was like, oh, it's only 3 songs, and then the next thing is bam, it's like half the night or something. So I really I appreciate that about them. It's very organic the way they move through things, and but at any rate, I do remember that. I remember coming out and playing in Denver a couple nights at Fiddler's Green, a bit later. And but it's been a long time since the band has been out with them, and we were finally going to get to be back with them this year at the Gorge after all that time.
We were going to be there.
Yeah, we have tickets, so we were so bummed when that
what a
when
shame.
it got canceled. But
I mean, it was going to be hard for us to do because we weren't going to be touring, and we don't play that much these days. We'll get together and do several weeks, maybe a couple times a year. So it was hard gig to turn down, because we wanted to do it so bad, but it was also going to be really hard to do, to get everybody together, get some playing under our belt, get the gear out of mothballs, ship it across the country, show up, play, and play for however many people. It was, but we were going to do it, because again, you don't want to say no. There's certain things you just shouldn't say no to. They're just too special, and it was going to be worth it, but it was going to be complex.
you think that'll happen in 2021?
I hope so, and if it does, I hope we can have a tour that leads us into it. So we're we're into the music, we're inside our music, and I mean it would have gone great. I know it would have gone great, but hopefully it'll still happen.
I hope so. Just talking about some of those like one-off guest spots in 2015, you guested with them in Saratoga on "Friend of the Devil," a tribute to the Grateful Dead and their "Fare Thee Well" concert in Chicago happening that same time. Do you remember how that came about? Whose idea it was to let's recognize the Dead here? I
don't know. I mean, I just showed up and what do you want to play? And at that point, the band had moved into rehearsing in the basement of the theaters. They had a small rehearsal rig set up, and I think what they had learned was that when the band plays a live show, they play one way, and when they do sound check, they play another way. Mm-hmm. So what they would do is they'd go up there and do sound check and change everything to get it to sound good at sound check, and then they go out on stage for the real show, and nothing would be right, and they'd spend the first 5 songs going, this is no good. Hey, help. So they learned, the crew fired them from sound check apparently at some point. And the show started going a lot better, but they still wanted that chance to play and practice new songs and see what they felt like playing that night. So they would meet around sound check time down in the basement of the arena with a little crappy drum set up and a few mics so Dave could hear himself singing, a few little amplifiers. So I remember being down there and running through a few things, and practicing "Friend of the Devil," and it was a cool tune to get to play on. It never had banjo on it when the Dead did it, but I believe Dave Holtzman played mandolin on it, so I was familiar with it. I liked the song, so and I didn't expect it to be such a big deal. I saw it afterwards. That was the thing everybody was talking about, and I thought it was a toss-off. Hey, it's the Dead thing is happening this week, and we'll throw in a Dead song. I don't think anybody was expecting as much excitement about it as it generated.
Yeah, absolutely. It was huge, and that was really, really cool. We just actually threw that into one of our recent podcasts and said how much we appreciated that, that version and the style that y'all played it. Is a much more upbeat style, and just kind of the way that we were like, man, we like it this way, not the slower way that kind of the Dead has been playing it.
So good.
It was so good. Next I wanted to really take you back to 2008 when Leroy Moore was unfortunately injured, and immediately they had to go find a replacement. And Leroy pointed and said, "Jeff Coffin, that's our man. That's who needs to do this." That's apparently what was said. And Nolan and I happened to be at the first show that Jeff played. That very next show after Leroy was hurt, and we saw Jeff come and fill in. What was that like for you? Jeff being called up, and then unfortunately Roy passing, and Jeff kind of filling in full time for them, and basically taking a band member, I guess, away from you guys. But what was going on with you? What was your perspective there?
Jeff had been with the band for a long time, and Jeff was. I wouldn't have chosen a saxophone to be the instrument to be in the Flecktones, because I was looking for something more off the beaten track. But Jeff was just such a great player and such an all-around team member, such a phenomenal doubler, played so many instruments, such a great hang. It was originally he was going to come out with a weekend for the weekend, just for a couple of, just to sit in for a couple of gigs, and he stayed for 14 years. But at the end of that 14 years, we'd made a number of records with him. We tried a lot of different stuff, and Victor was kind of in a sense of really wanting to go off and do his own thing. I was starting to do some other kinds of things, and I was really kind of feeling bad about the fact that Jeff wasn't the Flecktones weren't playing. The gig wasn't on. We were taking like a year or 2 years off, or something. We were in a big hole. And that's my memory of it. Now you could look at the timing on the calendar and figure out exactly what part of my memory is accurate about it. But Jeff called me and said, "Hey, Leroy got hurt, and the guys have asked me to come sit in." And I said, "Great, man, go do it." What a gas that's going to be, because Jeff would come alive when he played with the Dave Matthews Band, and sit in. And sometimes I would actually look at it and being very sort of lay backish, like don't overdo it. Like I would go, "Gosh, I hope." He would like play these long solos with Dave Matthews Band, and I would go, "God, I hope this isn't bugging Leroy, or I hope the band isn't, he's not playing too long, or overdoing it." Because he would get out the two saxophones, he would go crazy. I was like, "Gosh, we're guests here, But I was wrong. The guys were digging it; they were digging the crap out of it. So, and that's why they called him when Leroy got hurt. And then when Leroy died. And Jeff came to me and he said, I think the guys are gonna ask me to come on into the band. I don't know what to do." Now maybe he did know what he needed to do, but I immediately said, "Jeff, you have already put 14 years into the Flecktones. If you get to go play with the Dave Matthews Band for a number of years, you're going to be a guy who's played with the Flecktones and the Dave Matthews Band. This is one of the best things you could ever do for your career. And not only that, I don't know when we're going to play again." And so he has always just been such a great band member and team member, that he was always, "Well, if there's ever anything at all I can do, any way I can do it, I would love to do, I'd love to still have that association." And he has, any chance we've had when we're all in town, we've gotten together and done things. We've done things at Victor's camps. He sat in with the band when we're around. But after he left and went on, Victor and Future Man and I got together and talked about it. Still probably a good year after he'd gone. and said, well, is this the end of the story? What are we going to do? And Victor and Roy are the ones who said, well, I said, let's look into some other people. Let's see what else is out there, how we could make the band a whole new thing again, where it could go. And they both said, we really should talk to Howard first, because I think they both felt like that we hadn't really completed the Howard possibilities. And I was like, well, I love Howard, but okay, let's talk to him. And he was enthusiastic. And we got back together and had just such a great time playing together that seemed to be clearly the next course. And really the main reason that Jeff hasn't been involved is because he's on retainer with Dave now, and he can't guarantee he can be somewhere, so we can't advertise him. Anytime something came up with Dave, he would have to do that. And plus we went deeply back into the Howard experience, that version of the band, creating new music. And so I think still would be a great thing to do one day, is to have the 5-piece Flecktone band with Jeff. I still think the world of him, and he's just always been a connector, a person that brings people together. He's always supplying great musicians to Dave to check out, and he always supplied things to me, opened my mind to music that I didn't know about. And so I think he's a great dude. I'm glad he's landed one of the best gigs a saxophone player could ever have.
Does that make it even like a little more special when you guest with DMB, that you get to like reunite and play with Jeff again?
Oh yeah, I mean, we were like brothers. We hung hard for all of our Flecktone years. So anytime I'm with Jeff, it just feels very natural and sweet.
That's
awesome.
Awesome insight that I don't think any of us ever knew that kind of perspective on it. And I mean, we're just thankful that DMB and the Flecktones could kind of figure out that, navigate that situation and keep playing. I mean, it's 12 years since then, and I mean, so happy y'all are still making music.
Yeah, I think it's change sometimes is something people are afraid of. I actually like it. So when Howard left, I was petrified, but I was also excited, and a lot of great things came out of it. When Jeff left, I knew there was an opportunity for another chapter that would be different, and we've had that. So yeah, you've got to embrace change when it's inevitable.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. And I know that we've taken up a ton of your time here, so we just had a couple more just quick questions you can one-word answer if you want, before we let you get out of here and back to your cutting up of albums and dealing with 2-year-olds. So I wanted to know, is there anyone, because it seems like you've played with like everyone, The Dead, DMB, I mean, one of my favorite bands, Fish, all these bands. Is there anyone that you haven't guested with or collaborated with, jammed with, that you are still itching to get out there with? Or is there someone new on the scene that you really do want to collaborate with?
Well, there's so many great people. I really like Lionel Luecke. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. Lionel Luecke. He's a guitar player from West Africa who's been doing a lot of stuff in the jazz world. And I always wanted to do something with Pat Metheny, but I really don't think he likes the banjo. And then I got kind of there were times when I would listen to Dave Matthews that I got like a YouTube vibe off of them when I'd be sitting in with them, and I always thought, God, it'd be fun to play banjo with you two. Just yes. Sometimes the most fun thing to do on the banjo is just make a pocket, like be part of the rhythm section, make it just percolate, just get in there and go, and that's what I love doing with the Dave Matthews Band. I always thought that would be a lot of fun to do with you two. But I don't have a lot of regrets. A lot of people that I wished I had played with that I haven't been able to. I've gotten to play with quite a few of my heroes and become friends with a lot of them. So I think there's a world of possibilities still. And now that I'm a parent at the ripe old age of 62, I won't get to pursue all of them. There's a lot of international things that I would be exploring if I was flying solo. But and in fact, I'm kind of moving more into the bluegrass world because I think it's a good scene for raising kids. The festival scene will be a really fun place to bring the kids to, and so I want to have a presence in that world. And also the fact that Abigail has a place in that world, it's a really nice thing for our family. And at a certain point, I've got the Flecktones getting together every year to do stuff. I'm doing stuff with Edgar and Zakir. I'm playing with Chick Corea as a duo regularly. I've got Chris Thiele and I have a duo that we've got, that we've gotten up off the blocks and gone out and toured. And we have, 3/4 of a record ready to record. There's just so many things already and old friends that I don't want to give up playing with. So I'm going to have to wait for things that sort of come and grab me and shake me to make, or I just have to do it. Because right now, I guess I'm just more in a holding pattern with a very high level of friends and collaborators. But I don't want to stop growing and changing. But it's just, there's something wonderful about a long relationship too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we got to push for some more D&B, and then why not Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan? Then you just get all those Grammy nominations together. Let's do that.
Yeah. All right.
Sure.
I'll think of some people after we get off that I should have said, but I'm pretty fortunate.
Is there, was one of our last questions, but I mean, you've done everything from albums, concertos, documentaries. Is there something that sticks out that you're most proud of?
I think the trip to Africa will have to be, pretty high on the list. Throw Down Your Heart, the film and the recordings and the touring that I did. I felt like something was really happening that was unique and connected a lot of people, and opened a lot of people's eyes to the roots of the banjo, where it comes from. So that's pretty high up there. Flecktones is always going to be super high up there. Newgrass Revival years. Those 3 bluegrass albums, including the one that I'm just putting out, Drive and Bluegrass Sessions, and this new album, it's like the trilogy of that kind of music that I write for the banjo and for bluegrass band. So those are kind of way up there. But a lot of other great things. Bruce Hornsby's always been dear to me, and a lot of stuff going on. So hard to pick. I don't want to.
A lot of
hard
good
to
stuff.
nail it down through 40 years of
My wife. I'm leaving out my wife. So I mean,
Yeah.
the 2 of us, and going out there, like people were like, "Oh, he's just playing with his girlfriend." I was like, "No, this girl has got something going on. This is very special." So our banjo-centric duo has also been one of the great joys too.
Absolutely. It's just a pleasure to continue to see you making new music and all these future ventures. We're looking forward to hearing those as well. I mean, is there anything else before we let you go that you'd like to plug, that you would like to fill us in on? Because this has been just such a pleasure.
I guess I'll just close with the Throw Down Your Heart. This came out with a box set of the 2 albums, the movie and hour of extra footage, director and me talking while watching the film about everything that was happening. And we just put out a new album with Tumani Diabate. It's a duo album, just banjo and kora, which is very special. It's in vinyl as well as the box set. Awesome. You can get it separately or with the whole set. But it came out right in the middle of the pandemic. It's got like virtually no attention. There's been nothing really we could really do to spread the word about it, but it's a very special record. And what I do with Tumani, you think about it as it's a harp basically. It's a 21-string harp from Mali that he plays, and he just ripples, just beautiful ripples of sound, and so we just ripple together and flow. And one of the things I like about playing with him, he's also not in any hurry, like playing 41 for 41 minutes or whatever, or shooting for the record. When we played live, we would just play, we didn't need that many songs because they would go, and they would find all these nooks and crannies and eddies like a stream finding its way, down a mountainside. So I'm very proud of that, and it hasn't really gotten its due in terms of people finding out about it yet, but hopefully. Anyway, thanks,
Awesome.
guys. I enjoyed talking to you.
Bela, thank you so much for joining us here on the Corner of Gray Street podcast. All of our fans will obviously thank you as well. The D&B universe will thank you, and you have just been an absolute pleasure and overly generous with your time. So thank you so much yet again.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much.
All right, guys. Have a great day. Thanks for including me. I enjoyed it.
course. Stay safe.